So as I've been doing this study on temples and tabernacles, I've been able to make some correlations, and especially with regard to the book of Revelation, that I promise you we will be getting into. But it takes a while to actually lay out this foundation, and most of us are, pretty ignorant. I know I've studied the Bible for years, and I was really ignorant of the significance of the Tabernacle of David and how it contrasted and compared with other temples that God used that were, part of temple worship during biblical times. And also the fact that there's been so many of them. And really, the temple is where God's presence is and where he intersects with man. So man and God intersect at the place of the temple. Even though the temple is on earth, it doesn't belong to man. And even though the temple is on earth, God does not dwell only in this temple. God lives outside of the temple in his own place, and we live here. But God and men meet in this location. With the Mosaic temple, there was a priest who actually acted as a go-between between God and men. Now, in the Garden of Eden, the garden was actually a kind of a temple. It's where God and man met in this place. And the other thing that's really interesting about temples is they're associated with mountains. And we're going to look at that a little more closely as we go along in this study. Even Eden is associated with a mountain. And if we look in Ezekiel chapter 28, we actually read about, in symbolic form, Satan, his fall from, divine presence. And it says he was the anointed guardian cherub that was on the holy mountain of God in the midst of the stones of fire. And in verse 13 of Ezekiel 28, it says this: "You were in Eden, the garden of God, and every precious stone was your covering." When we see the New Jerusalem coming down out of heaven, it comes down, and John is standing on a great high mountain, and it's coming down, and it's a garden, okay? The tree of life is there in this holy city. So we can kind of compare and contrast Eden with the New Jerusalem that's going to be present on the earth. But today I really want to look at two tabernacles and their mountains. And that would be the Tabernacle of Moses and the Tabernacle of David. And of course, the Tabernacle of Moses is associated with several mountains. So the first mountain that the Tabernacle of Moses is associated with is Mount Sinai, and that's where Moses went up on Mount Sinai and got the instructions for building the tabernacle. One of the things that God told Moses was that he was supposed to make the tabernacle exactly the way he had seen it on the mountain. Okay, so the tabernacle itself is a reflection of the heavenly tabernacle or the heavenly temple. And by the way, heaven right now, the place where God dwells, is actually a tabernacle. It is temporary, and it is going to be destroyed one day. God is going to destroy it, and he's going to live in the New Jerusalem, which comes down out of heaven onto the earth at the very end after the millennium. But we'll get into that later. So the Tabernacle of Moses is associated with Sinai, and everything that's in the tabernacle is a reflection of the plan of salvation, of the person and work of Christ. And there's a lot of other things that go into that, and can't get into all of it here. The Tabernacle of Moses is associated with Mount Sinai. It's also associated with the mountains around Shiloh. Okay, and remember, that's where the tabernacle was placed once Joshua and the people entered into the promised land, and it was there for a very, very long time until the time of Eli and Samuel. and the Philistines. And remember, the Israelites carried the ark into battle. The Philistines stole it, and from that point on, the Ark of the Covenant was never in the Tabernacle of Moses again, ever. Okay, so the Tabernacle of Moses then eventually ended up in Gibeon, on Mount Gibeon. Okay, that's where it was at the time of David. Okay, and even when Solomon built his temple, before the dedication of his temple on Mount Moriah, Solomon went to the Tabernacle of Moses at Gibeon and offered sacrifices there, lots and lots and lots of them. And he took the brazen altar, and presumably the rest of the tabernacle was dismantled and brought to probably a storage place in the new temple that he built. So the Tabernacle of Moses was in existence up until the time of Solomon. It was on Mount Gibeon. Now, the Tabernacle of Moses is associated with the law and the giving of the law, with the carrying out of the commandments of God, with feast days, holy days, with the Aaronic priesthood, and someone qualified to be a priest because you were a descendant of Aaron. Okay, that's how you qualified to be a priest. There were daily sacrifices, occupied a lot of the time that the priests had. They were offering the sacrifices for the people and for God, and tending the tabernacle. And there was a veil that stood between the priest and the ark of God, the divine presence. So this is sort of what we're looking at with the Tabernacle of Moses. Now, the Tabernacle of David is associated with Mount Zion, okay? And we read about Mount Zion a lot, actually. A lot of the Psalms talk about Zion. So when David was worshiping at the tabernacle where the ark was located, okay, and basically it was only the ark. There was nothing else there. There's no outer courts. There was no holy place. There was no menorah. There was no altar of incense, no table of showbread. There was no veil. Okay, there was no veil that separated the ark from any place else in the tent. There were no animal sacrifices. There were only spiritual sacrifices of praise and worship. Okay, there was no rituals, that were done by the priests. Just 24/7 worship and praise to God. Okay, it was a very different place. So remember, in the Tabernacle of Moses, you had the Holy of Holies here, and then the holy place, and then there's outer courts, and there's a place for sacrifice, and there's the laver for washing. Basically what happened with the Tabernacle of Moses is this part right here was transferred to Mount Zion. All the rest of this disappeared, and all you have now is this place right here. The innermost sanctuary was transferred to Mount Zion, the presence of God. So Mount Zion is associated with praise, worship, and the presence of God, and what we would call a royal priesthood. Not an Aaronic priesthood, but a royal priesthood, of which David typified. Okay, he was a king, but he's dressed as a Levite. Okay, he's wearing the white linen robe and the ephod. Okay, it's a royal priesthood. Okay, the book of Hebrews goes into this a lot. This is basically comparing and contrasting two different types of worship. This one here is based on the law, and this one here is based on a right relationship with God. Kings and priests who've been made kings and priests through the blood of Christ. Okay, and that's what all of this prefigures. Okay, it prefigures our standing before God. So when you think about the church, okay, believers, Christians, we offer up sacrifices of praise according to the book of Hebrews. That's one of the things we do. We pray for one another. We no longer have to offer up sacrifices. We don't have to keep the Mosaic law. God's law has been placed in our hearts through His Spirit that He's given us. Actually, the holy days sort of disappear too, because that's all a part of this system. The Aaronic priesthood is done away with because we have Christ as the royal priest, as king and priest. Mount Zion is the location where God and men intersect in the book of Revelation. Mount Zion is mentioned, and when you see Mount Zion, you should think Tabernacle of David. Okay, that's how we should be thinking about this. Now, Solomon's temple was built on a different location. It was built on Mount Moriah. And on the next video, I want to talk about how it came to be on Mount Moriah, the circumstances surrounding all of that, because that's a different mountain with a different temple, okay, and a different setup, and it's not the same thing as the Tabernacle of Moses or the Tabernacle of David. But I want to look at Mount Moriah, which is the place where Solomon's temple would be built, and we'll look a little bit more at Mount Zion too. So I hope you'll stay tuned for that. We'll see you on the next video. Leave a comment in the comment section, and I hope you have a very, very blessed day.